Hello everybody, welcome again to Red Weapon Theory episodes 3 and 4. This is Sendaria and Dak from the Order, and we're going to be talking today about weapon physics, being the third episode, and the fourth episode covering the two basic offensive forms, the power and tech forms. I wanted to combine the two today because we haven't put out a video in a while, and want to give you that to share that with you today. Again, these are theory videos, kind of the disclaimer to go with it. These are things that we've used from the Order going forward, things that we've tried and kind of implemented and pioneered. I want to share that with you today for you advanced Red users to, again, give you more of a tool in your toolkit per se. So without further ado, we'll go in and start and cover with the weapon physics portion.
First, learn to use this. Then I'll teach you to use this.
Alright, first off, what I really want to get across with weapon physics is this is my opponent, Sendaria. She's wielding medium red, and I'm wielding a min red, okay? Most of the time the point I want to get across is we don't do enough critical thinking at what our opponent has against us versus what we have against them. Okay, so I'm going to break it down for you guys, and hopefully by the end of this portion, you'll be able to quickly and accurately get enough information from your opponent so that you can be able to use the most opportune strikes in your arsenal to counter what they have. Okay, so I'll break it down. First thing I want to talk about is these weapons. Okay, if you can, as we go through this, you're not going to always know, but if you can, look at your opponent's weapon, okay? Obviously, just from a stance, she's got the longer weapon. That's important because as a weapon this long, she has a good extra 5 inches on me. No pun intended. She's got an extra 5 inches, which means she should, if she's an experienced fighter, she should have the first strike on me. I cannot hit her from that distance. These are common knowledge things, but these are things we need to take into consideration every encounter in fighting. If, in the case where I have a smaller weapon, what I properly need to do is I need to wait for that strike and then attack. So let her have the first move. It takes a lot of the complication out of things. She's got the longer weapon, be patient, let her strike, and then attack afterwards. So looking at weapon properties, if it's a glaive, obviously if it's a glaive and you start to get it, we don't have a glaive today, but if it's a glaive, you start to get into this dead range where you can get up close and now you have a supreme advantage. We use that all the time, but I don't think, at least I don't use it enough, and we all should do a better job at looking at range advantage, okay? The next thing on the weapon properties in physics is whether it's a stabby. Most weapons these days are stabbies. They can be identified by green tags on the bottom. If your opponent, again, if you can't gather this information, it's okay, but if you are able to, if you know it's a stab, in this case Sendaria is covering it up, but if you can see that they open it up and it's a green stabby, I now know that my opponent has the capability to stab. If I know that she doesn't, then I can use that against her. Things you need to gather, again. One of the other things we want to talk about is the weight of the weapon. Now this one is extremely important because I do not know how much that weapon weighs, but I can see how she wields herself. If she after her swings, if she sways a little bit, I can tell that the weapon's a little heavier. You can get an idea, and it's hard to explain, but with a min, you can do a lot of manipulation with a min, and you can get in and do certain things with it, whereas with a heavier weapon, the toolbox is different. It's not better or worse, it's different. Knowing what kind of weapon they have, and go ahead and go do a swing at me. Just go ahead and swing at the weapon. The example being, you can get shattered. If a hard swing is done, and I have a lighter weapon, and I swing really hard at her, her weapon's not going to move as much as when she hits my weapon. If you're not ready for it, you could get disarmed immediately. So, knowing about weapon weights is also very big because usually it follows with the fighter who's behind it. Typically, guys that will have a lot of strength, and we'll get into this later with the power form, will use heavier weapons as it does benefit them. Whereas lighter fighters that use mins can get in quick and manipulate the weapon to strike. So knowing what kind of weight, we're trying to get a good idea, and that's usually done by, go ahead and do some shots at me, that's usually done by manipulating and letting them swing a few times and getting a gauge and gathering that information, if you have time, of course. In the heat of battle, we don't always have time for that. A couple other side notes I want to talk about. The opponent's armor. What type of armor do they have? These are basic things that I'm probably reiterating on, but type of armor. Sometimes, is this armor? Ask your opponent, is that armor? If it isn't, in this case it's a red. But for you blue users, it can mean a difference. So knowing what kind of armor spots, especially what's damaged and what's not, if it's not armor, I could stab one-handed and take that away. If they do have patches of armor and you're not sure, you need to gather that information. If they have a backup weapon, we don't have a dagger today, but should she look like she has a glaive, okay, for example, and I have a minimum weapon, it would behoove me to get in close and attack. But with a good user like her, she could pull a dagger off her hip and stab me right in the gut. So it would be, if you notice that they're ready to reach for an offhand, or if it's a spear user with a down sword, many spear users, many archers don't even have an offhand. That's a big fundamental difference. If you have a spear user with a down sword, he's ready to use it. You have to break through that spear, and then you also have to be ready to wait for that stingray tail, if you will. So look out for the offhand weapons that are there. These are all things that are very basic, broken down, but you need to be able to gather them like that. And to go through these lists of items in that order, or whatever order you prefer, I just want to highlight them and help you guys out there. These are things that are probably going to increase your effectiveness in battle. So without any further ado on that, that covers it for weapon physics. We're going to go into the forms, which is going to be the more of the majority of this video, and that'll be it. All right, so we're going to talk about the two forms next. The first form I want to go into actually is the power form, and the second form is the technical, or what we call for short the tech form. I'm going to go in for all the basics of it. These are the two basic forms that I've organized in my brain to try to package up and help you guys as an audience. So if it comes out weird and you don't understand it, I'm open for questions at the end of it and discussion, but I really just genuine effort to try to get out and help the community by sharing some of the methodologies, by talking about these basic but actually advanced forms that you can use as a red fighter. All right, so what I want to talk about first is the form of power. Now for lefties, this is all backwards. In most cases I've heard actually from experienced left-handed users that they don't even go this way and they don't even use it this way. But I know for righties this rings true. So if you're a lefty out there, I encourage you to go out in the field and try what I'm saying in backwards, if that makes any sense, in reverse, excuse me, and see if this works for you. But a power stance, okay? A power stance has many advantages and disadvantages against it. What it is your typical standard stance. It is with the arms rested at a comfortable position. It is what you see in the movies of the broadsword fighter. You see in historical combat, it is the stance to deliver power. The reason we call it power is it is your dominant hand on top and the passive hand on the bottom, used for guiding, power generation. But the power generation in the power stance comes from not only your arms, it comes almost mainly from your back. You're generating all of your power with this foundation of footing, and you're generating a strike that's made to deal extreme amounts of power and advantages that go with it. Go ahead and pick up a shield and a sword. The advantage with a power stance that you first and foremost get, as you all know, red users, and the most fun, is shattering. When you shatter with shattering is the ability to knock the weapon out, dislodge it, sometimes disarm, I'm going to drop it when I hit and dislodge it. You can manipulate when you have that generation by your back. When you're generating on a shield, depending on the type of shield, and we didn't cover this in weapon physics, but depending on the type of shield that can be manipulated, with power stance, you can turn the shield almost sideways. With the technical stance we'll cover after this, those shots don't exist. The power stance, you're aiming to intimidate as well. You're aiming to scare your opponent, strike hard, strike fast, hopefully shatter them, hopefully intimidate their defenses. You want them afraid of you because of this unbound power that you have that's coming from your back and that's coming from your footing, your footwork. We talked about the grip, right? The footing can change either way. If you go with the left, you could start with the left and you could step in and strike. You can also start with the prep stance and you can just strike from where you are, or you can move as you go. I'm not going to go in detail in the footing. There's been a lot of videos already out there about it. What I'm going to talk about though is the way your feet are positioned far apart or in a comfortable position, and whichever foot's forward, whichever foot you prefer forward, there's a lot of that movement. You're keeping your legs strong, you're keeping your foundation, and the power comes from your back in this stance. Typically, users who favor heavier reds, this is a medium 48 ounce red, 56 inches long. It is typically favors the power stance. It's got that heavy girth to it, so when you do hit a shield, it will turn it sideways, it will jar them. They'll take that red shot. They won't call light on a power shot. The disadvantage of the power stance. The disadvantage, first and foremost, is it does take a lot of energy. When you're generating these strikes, you're generating these powerful shots from your back. You're using a lot more muscles. In general, you're using a lot more muscles to move a heavier weapon. Whether or not you're built for it or not, it just takes a lot of energy to do. But what you get out of it is you inject that force into your opponent. Beyond using more energy, you also are at risk of telegraphing your attacks. You see fighters all the time will whiff because they swung so hard, and if opponent comes in, go ahead and attack me after the shot. Opponent comes in hard, they can see that. If you swing really hard and heavy, you've telegraphed, because these swings with the back are very broad strikes. Those are probably the two key main disadvantages of a power stance. But I'm going to talk more about the advantages rather than the disadvantages, which we already covered. What I'm going to cover next now is the tech stance, or technical stance. You can stay in that if you want. Tech stance, notice I switched to a lighter weapon. This is a minimum red. The technical stance, now you can use either hand or. The grip preferred with this stance is now you've switched, where the power, you now have the technical. Your dominant hand is below. For more agile movement, you're actually looking to guide this. We're focused before on power, now in strength, we're now focused on acceleration. Technical stance, where you had before on the form, where you had your feet farther apart, now your feet are more on the back ends. And my toes are actually up. You are more of a balanced, flighty stance. You're made to bounce around. You're made to move a little bit more. A lot of deception is used in this stance. As tech, when you switch to a tech form, again, these are accelerated shots made to just generate enough force in the spectrum of dagger here of what we consider a hit. I know there's been a lot of discussion of what's a hit, what's considered a hit. I've been playing for a long time, and I know that what's too light and what's too heavy, and there actually is quite a broad spectrum. But the objective is the tech is you want to swing just light enough to generate enough force. And in this move I'm going to show you is actually a leg sweep. I'm taking her leg out from underneath her using tech. Instead of powering through the shield and striking at that shield like a power would do, I'm switching the hands to the dominant hand so I have more range and I can take out that leg. Once the leg's down, the opponent's on their knees, and then you can break them down, and you can even switch back into a power form again and break down that shield. I won't go too into details of how to walk through step by step, but some examples of what you can do as a technical fighter. You don't have a lot of power with this stance. You don't have a lot of power to take shield shots with this stance. So you're aiming, stick your hand out a little bit. You're aiming to take off that arm. You're aiming to take off the leg, and snipe those shots. It's more of a sniper position, if you will. It's very energy efficient. That's another advantage about it. But because of its energy efficiency, again, it is very, very light shots. In general, that creates, you're not going to be able to swing heavy. You're not going to create a lot of intimidation unless you're very flighty and you keep that range. You snipe for the legs and you work that. It is a form you can still switch your hands. You can still use the mimics. You can do a lot more fakes. You have a bigger toolbox with this stance. You can do a lot more opening the opponent up, and then you can get back off. But as soon as you lock down into that power form, you lose a little bit of fast-paced mobility, and you become more structured. You gain more power immediately. So in a fight, you're going to change in between these two stances frequently if you want to, I guess. Or some fighters prefer just to use a power type stance and a form and a grip, and other fighters tend to use more of a flighty, technical style fighting where they will swing quick and fake and use acceleration over general brute force power with a lighter weapon and a bigger toolbox. But they give up shattering and all the other benefits that come with a heavier and more powerful weapon. So I think I beat a dead horse on that one. And that's what we really came to talk about. I guess that's the end of this discussion in theory. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, I would give you more examples, but we would be going on all night about how to take down a shieldman using power versus tech, how to counter a power fighter as a tech, how to counter a tech as a power. I encourage you to go home and think about it and work with that on your own time. I just really wanted to break down the two fundamental styles that I have in my head that I switch interchangeably in through each fight. So again, guys, thank you. I know there's a lot of words, a lot of rambling, and not a lot of actual combat, but this is just the theory of it. So go home, practice, get good. Thank you guys for watching.